Okay, everybody, it's 2:45. We're gonna go ahead and get started on the aquatic invasive species session. We appreciate everybody taking the time to come today. I know we have a pretty exciting agenda to talk through what's going on in the region. We have delegates from Canada to come down and talk about some of the things that they're doing, and then also Justin Bush from the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife is going to be presenting on what's going on between Washington and Oregon and also the current state of quagga and zebra mussels. So with that, I'm gonna hand the mic over to Justin and have him get started on the presentation today.
Great. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you Pacific Northwest Economic Region for the opportunity to bring this session together today. We've got some great participants online as well as in this room. We have brought together this session to talk about the evolving and imminent threat of invasive freshwater mussels, to talk about how jurisdictions are becoming more prepared and more preventative together. A lot of jurisdictions are doing a lot of great things, but we're then going to bring an opportunity within the Pacific Northwest Economic Region to spotlight how we can really set a roadmap together to drive all organizations toward that future that we're envisioning. We then have a legislative panel and a call to action, and then we'll talk about where to go from here. So with that, that's the agenda for today. We're going to start off with a few opening statements. But first off, wanted to send regrets on behalf of the other Pinware invasive species co-chairs. Senator Van Burtenshaw with the state of Idaho couldn't be here today. And then my counterpart with the British Columbia government, Martina Beck, also could not be here. So that's your team of 3 co-chairs, although you're seeing me today. With that, really wanted to thank Senator Mike Cuff with the state of Montana for taking some time to be with us and share some opening remarks. Senator Cuff.
Thank you. And thank you for coming today. This subject that we're talking about, I was there when it began developing, and that was 2011. It was a winter meeting in Victoria. And the representative from Idaho was pushing hard and disappointed not getting as far as he wanted to be. And at the end of the meeting, I helped him clean up, and we had a little discussion in the state legislature. And he said, we're gonna make this happen. And I was his wingman. And I thought, well, you got that wrong. That I'm not a technical guy. And I'm much more of a generalist, but I recognize some seriousness. And then he was there a year or so, and as he faded away, it became my passion. And Montana began developing a program. Idaho had a very good program. We began trying to get that good. And then in late 2016, we got hit. We had a couple of reservoirs, the Belliers, which are the tadpole state of zebra quagga mussels. And the task force was formed. The governor called for a task force. We went over after it got home. And some people say we defeated it. Well, I'm not going to say we defeated it. I'm going to say we got lucky. And the population did not get whole. There were clearly villagers and two lakes that were found, probably from bass fishing boats that come over from fishing bass tournament. So we got even more aggressive. Matt Morrison and I spent a lot of time, and there were others, working with federal government. We got some funding. The funding that is shared among the 4 states, Oregon, Washington, and Montana. And we all developed better programs. None of us are perfect. And it's the type of thing that is really tough to be perfect about. But we've done pretty well for quite a few years. Every one of our states has picked up many native folks. And I gotta believe that if we weren't out there picking up as many as we did, there would be some live hits. Idaho is dealing with a serious problem, and they've attacked it pretty aggressively. I'm not convinced that they have it done yet. But I'm also very convinced they're not stopped going after it. So at this point, I think we can say it's probably contained right there. I know there are some people downstream that have some concerns, and they should. And they should be really focusing on early detection, rapid response. That has contained the problem as much as it has been contained, if it is contained. Others of us need to be prepared for the same thing. I think now we should be focusing on water body by water body, each of the states, each of the provinces. Say, what would happen if we got it there? What could we do? Idaho was able to jump on it hard with some chemical treatment, but we probably could not have used it on them. The only way we could have used it if we grabbed it, threw it in before anybody knew. And I'd probably be looking out for bars. I probably would have been willing to take the risk. I've said the last few years, people have said, well, how do you make the program? What do we need to do? And I've said, you need a champion. You need somebody willing to step up, carry the flag. And it may be any one of you. But I will tell you that Mary Dodd was a champion. She's a bulldog. And I've known her a lot of years. I don't know this Idaho representative as well, but she looks like she's Christian. And the two of them, with some others. You need a champion, somebody that's gonna push it out, keep pushing. I know Mary's not tough. I've seen her push President Trump before. Yeah, well. That's what this needs. I'm going to be moving into another group, but I wanted to say a few words here. It's been a good program. It's not a done program, and I don't think it will be. But, we talked a little bit ago, green crabs are quite a problem on the coast. Stretching from, I think, Oregon, Washington, on up, maybe California, up to Alaska now. And there was suggestion adding that with a proposal that we made earlier today. Before I leave, I want to say I'm against that. I do think effort needs to be done about green crab. I don't think we should burden, I think the mussel issue is a tough enough issue to carry it on by ourselves. There's a major, I believe, threat to our funding going on, because a number of other drainages have reached into the pot of money that we here at Kenwater got established. When it took us a few years to get it where it is. And finally, we started getting agreement right just about the time that we were tackling the issue of the T-Rex aboard. Yeah. It's important, I believe, that we pass this proposal. I think it's a resolution, but don't add anything else to it. You're gonna go after green crab because it's not into, well, it should be done separately. So with that, I want to thank the folks that we have here. I know each of them personally. And that's the kind of thing that some are gonna be harder, more aggressive. Some have responsibilities that are bigger. I think that Saskatchewan is gonna dive in with the bigger, because we have the Minister of Environment for the province of Saskatchewan on this panel here, who also happens to be the incoming president for Pacific Northwest Economic. That's a lot of clout. When he goes to Ottawa, it's been hard to get Ottawa interested in providing support. He's gonna have a little bigger clout. And Grant Hunter, another good one. So you've heard enough from me. It's still a big topic. Still a very serious challenge. They're on the border between Manitoba and Saskatchewan in Lake Winnipeg. I'm very honestly surprised that Saskatchewan may not already have some kind of investigation someplace, the big territory. But somebody has to pick up the flag and carry it. Somebody has to step up to the people with the big purse strings and say, we need some help on this. You get them in your way on waterway, you got it. You're probably not gonna get rid of them. not forever, that changes the lifestyle, it changes that body of water forever. I'm not a technical guy, have a little bit of pretty good understanding of how this thing works, but there's a lot of people here smarter on the topic than me. Thank you for listening. Don't let this thing ever go. Pretty soon, whether it's this year or next year, might be my last time at Hill. I will still follow Aquatic Invasive species. And you guys, you got a serious burden. And by coming here today, tells me you're up to it. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Senator Cuff. We appreciate that welcome. We appreciate you being with us today. So I think that was a really great preface, and perhaps better than the opening that your co-chairs for the scripted plan. So appreciate that, both the history as well as that call to action. Briefly, just want to summarize some of the risks and try to spotlight some things that we can be thinking about as a region as we think about increased prevention and increased readiness. Pacific Northwest Economic Region has been a leader for many years on this topic. Yes, sir?
Oh, I wanted to mention, you have Representative carried some legislation to stiffen up penalties on folks transporting. Then say eventually transporting and folks who are carrying it because that's how it gets around. And the trucks and trailers and people driving them then have to pay a pretty steep fine. He's going to be in by Zoom. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And Representative Millett, we can see you online and look forward to having you join the panel in a short few minutes. But just wanted to start off with the economic risk and, thinking about the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, thinking about the lunchtime seminars, thinking about our energy landscape. It's never been more important to protect our critical infrastructure. PNWR actually published the study back in 2015 looking at annual mitigation costs. We can only assume that that's increased. Everything else I've purchasing recently has doubled. So I'm assuming some of those maintenance contracts would be the same. One of the things I want to point out is that different jurisdictions have completed their own economic studies, looking at different sectors and potential impacts. While we haven't done that as a region, it's reasonable to assume that PNWR study would have similar costs for mitigation and maintenance for other raw water infrastructure, such as irrigation systems, drinking water systems, as well as wastewater treatment systems, legacy data centers that use raw water, as well as navigational locks. We haven't necessarily completed that economic study, but wanted to spotlight some of the risks, and being from the state of Washington, it's the data I have most accessible. So some of these things are giving an example of Washington, but I think it's reasonable to assume that all the other jurisdictions, whether states or provinces, have similar values. First off, the Columbia River Marine Highway from Lewiston to the mouth of the Columbia River is one of our key commodity gateways and what we're shipping around the world and to different states and up to Canada. Ultimately, that's worth $31.2 billion. Thinking about fouling, certainly that whole value isn't a risk, but any certain percentage of impact is going to be astronomical in a very short period of time. Thinking about irrigated agriculture, this is the value for Washington, but I think it's similar. Who else here from other jurisdictions has irrigated agriculture? Almost all. And then thinking about outdoor recreation, thinking about our Pacific Northwest sense of place. Why do we live here? What do we do with our families in the free time, especially in the summer? Much of that involves water. And thinking about the values that are associated with that, if we lose the ability to recreate, ultimately people will recreate elsewhere, right? We're not going to stop recreating. We just may lose the ability to do it in our backyard. What else is at risk? Thinking about aquatic habitats, water quality and pollution, as well as the impacts to native species. All these things are at risk. Those are the things that's hard to assign an economic value to. And then beyond that, as if things couldn't get a whole lot worse, there's actual health concerns associated with these species. We know from the Great Lakes that there will be an increase in harmful algal blooms and cyanobacteria. That is a threat to humans as well as animals. We know that the mussels bioaccumulate toxins and ultimately are increasing exposure to other species, things we may be consuming. The mussels were not. You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then thinking about some other things on the horizon that we're really looking at the literature on are things like increases in avian botulism, which is a bacteria that could lead to bird mortality. It's something that we've seen in the Great Lakes area. So I'm really excited to look at some of this new information, experiences in other jurisdictions to think about what we should be planning for now. And then beyond that, that sense of place, that Pacific Northwestern identity, you know, that's so hard to put into words, especially to our First Nations and to our tribes. Ultimately, when these resources are lost, there's probably no going back. And so this really is why we're here. This is the call to action for the conversation today, and leads us to this session. I want to make sure that we get enough time for our jurisdictions talking about what's happening, but ultimately wanted to briefly talk about how the threat's evolving. In the past 20 years, we've been working together. Things have changed a bit. They've gotten more efficient. There's more coordination, collaboration, information sharing. Ultimately, we've built a network across the Pacific Northwest of organizations that are protecting us every day through watercraft inspections, using policies and regulatory programs to truly prevent this problem. In the state of Washington, for example, we actually have help. We're not just doing it alone. We've enlisted canines, taking canines and giving them a job. I believe Alberta, as well as British Columbia, has done the same thing. And ultimately, we're still finding this threat almost on a regular basis. In Washington, we've found 14 vessels already this year with invasive mussels on it. So the threat is persistent, but it is changing. One of the things that happened last year is that there was a species and trade issue. Marimo mossballs, which is a common aquarium product, were illegally imported to the United States from the native range of the zebra mussel in Ukraine to an importer in Florida. Here you can see the distribution of where those illegally imported products that were contaminated with zebra mussels went around the United States. The map that you see at the top is actually the distribution from a wholesaler in Washington to retailers across the state of Washington. We work together across our state agencies with federal agencies to wrangle all those mussels and destroy them, knowing that they couldn't then introduce our water bodies through aquarium dumps and other forums. But we can't speak to what every other state did. And so I think this is a spotlight of risk. We need to not only think about boats moving, but we also need to think about other pathways. And then we also have a new challenge on the horizon. There's a species that wasn't known to be in North America up until last fall. It's called the golden mussel. It's in a different family from quagga and zebra mussels, but it's quagga and zebra mussel-like. And you'll see why as we talk a little more about this. Ultimately, it's a freshwater species that attaches to hard substrates with byssal threads, very much like the quagga and zebra mussel. However, it's not from the Ukraine. It's native to Asia. It's been introduced in a series of areas around Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, as well as South America. And a lot of our information about this species is actually coming from South America. I mentioned that it has similar environmental and economic impacts. When we see the number, you'll see why. The state of Washington, quagga and zebra mussels threaten us to the tune of 100 million annually. That's like 1/5 of the total pinware study. When you look at the information from Brazil, where it's invasive and impacting their electricity sector, an annual impact of over 120 million. So quagga and zebra mussel-like, very much so. Why is this a threat? This is something that's very serious, and I know not everyone is a biologist, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but wanted to introduce two things. The salinity limit, so how much salinity in water will be lethal to the species. Continuous salinity, it's actually fairly low, but it takes intermittent salinity at a fairly high level. Why does this matter? You'll see in a moment. And then the other thing is that the calcium limit, so these mussels make their shells from calcium in the water column. Quagga and zebra mussels, 22, 23 to 28 milligrams per liter. The golden mussel, 1. So this is pretty alarming because there's water bodies that simply didn't have the calcium to support quagga and zebra mussels, which protected us, prevented them from becoming established. However, most water bodies have a calcium level of 1, if not all. And so this is not only a call to action for quagga and zebra mussels, but we really need to take this seriously because a lot of different water bodies are going to be at risk that historically were not. And wanted to point out that this is an evolving threat. We've looked at watercraft inspection station maps in the past. That's the best way to protect us from the infested east coast of the United States and Canada. We want to inspect vessels, decontaminate them, prevent them from entering our water bodies. The map that you see here is the Marine Highway 580 near Stockton. This is where the golden mussel is found, pretty widely distributed. It's likely they were there before they found it. But thinking about the connections and the risk to our economic region, the Marine Highway 580 connects to the Marine 5, that's saltwater, moving up to Marine Highway 84, which goes all the way up to Lewiston in Idaho. And ultimately things are then shipped and spread eastward from there and north as well. So wanted to kind of expand our thinking about this. We need to not only protect us from mussels moving westward, we also need to start thinking about a future where an infected vessel could be moving to the Columbia River and then potentially could be the jumping off place to infest the rest of the economic region. Not great, right? But a great call to action. We got this. We know how to do it. So wanted to just spotlight that we know that water bodies are moving from the infested Columbia River Delta. We can see they even went up to Alaska. So I do think Canada should be concerned about golden mussels as well. But also this new narrative that vessels, ocean-going vessels going from freshwater port or brackish water port to freshwater or brackish water port could be the new starting place for the golden mussel. And then we'll be addressing that in a very similar way. So this is the doom and gloom session, but also it's not, because we're going to have a panel discussion to talk about how jurisdictions are increasing their preparedness, building new partnerships, taking that work that's been done over 20 years and elevating it to where we really need to take it for the next 20 years, which is our next panel. Only 7 minutes over. Thank you, Senator Cupp. So we're going to start off with a quick overview of an Oregon and Washington working group. We're going to then talk about the Alberta Aquatic Invasive Species Task Force. We're going to get an update on the Saskatchewan Summit. And then we're going to have an open panel discussion with Steve Myers talking about what Pinware is talking about doing in terms of creating a vision through a resolution that can be kind of the compass setting event for all of us as we increase what we're doing across all jurisdictions. Sound good? Okay. Steve, maybe set a timer for me if you would. I'm representing my counterpart Keith DeHart with the state of Oregon today. And the state of Oregon and Washington came together to increase their shared prevention and readiness following a detection of quagga mussels in the free-flowing Snake River. And ultimately, the two state agencies, the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Oregon and the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Washington, are the two kind of sister agencies charged with preventing and stopping invasive species. So thinking about the shared waters of the Columbia River, we brought together both of those state agencies, about 20 different staff, including directors from our director's office, and shared information on our authorities, kind of what is the state of affairs in both states, and talked about how we can work together toward the shared vision of Snake River followed by a Columbia River that's infested. We then realized pretty quickly that the two state agencies couldn't do this themselves. We needed to bring together partners, it all scales, to talk about what things we could be doing to take our prevention and readiness and elevate it. Ultimately, the working group that we brought together more than 33 different participants representing 21 different organizations, state agencies, state invasive species councils, tribal nations and tribal organizations, regional organizations, as well as federal agencies, academic institutions, as well as industry, kind of the cross spectrum. Notably, we also had state legislators involved in this effort. In the state of Oregon, we had Representative Bobby Levy and Representative Ken Helm. And in Washington, we had Representative Mary Dye participating. So we not only had subject matter experts, but we had elected officials that could help inform the feasibility and the approach of taking something that can be actionable. Ultimately, the involvement of these legislators really showed the commitment of both states toward this issue and helped lay the foundation for both state houses in terms of how they're going to address this. We outlined the imminent threat, readiness gaps, and came up with 5 pillars for action: prevention, public awareness, rapid response preparedness, and partnerships. And when it comes to partnerships, our cup floweth over. We've got 20 years of partnerships. But I think all of us will agree as we talk about this is that we need to create more partnerships. We need to reinforce older partnerships, and we need to identify new partnerships and lay that foundation for the next 20 years. And then finally, research. We need more information. We need better science to solve this problem. In terms of near-term actions, expanding monitoring, developing a unified communications plan, both for Washington and Oregon, so that we're singing from the same songbook when the time comes. Working with our legislatures to define governors, I believe that's a premier in Canada, to define how we would implement an emergency and proclaim that emergency. To things like longer term goals, such as strengthening our regulatory tools, perhaps increasing fines, or conducting drills for how we'd actually do a response. And that's something that Senator Cuff mentioned, is thinking more at a site-specific level. You know, not every incident is going to take the same set of skills and tools. It's going to be nuanced depending on the site, the flow, all sorts of things. And with that, we were able to create this report that really was, in a lot of ways, supporting documentation as well as a call to action. Thank you. So that our legislatures in both respective states could look at this, understand what the needs were, and then take appropriate action. In the state of Washington, this was very supportive in our state receiving funding for the next 2 years. This includes an increase of 1.81 million of state funds, with the ability to leverage 1.81 million in federal funds for the next 2 years. So kind of taking this game plan and then putting some dollars behind it to actually implement it. And in the state of Oregon, the report actually influenced the development of House Bill 2170, House Bill 2982, and House Bill 2981. Was told just this morning that one of which allows Oregon state agencies to enter intergovernmental agreements, so that local governments, tribes, and other service districts can actually be delegated authority to do watercraft inspections, to be force multipliers. That was signed and passed by their governor, which is really great. The other increases boating fees and then deposits those monies into a state aquatic invasive species prevention fund. So our experience, I feel like, was really great. Would ask in maybe 10 or 20 seconds or less to ask Representative Dye her thoughts on that topic, but you know, we didn't really have a shared vision between Washington and Oregon. We now do. It's the main point. Representative Dye.
Thank you, Justin. This has been an amazing experience as a legislator in a rural community, when you have a champion in a state agency who is totally dedicated and committed to this work for his whole career, and then to bring together partners. When we started the task force, it was amazing how many partners there were. I mean, it's just the gamut of expertise that people that have dedicated their life's work to studying endangered aquatic invasive species, including our federal partners at U.S. Fish and Wildlife and at the NIMS and Army Corps of Engineers, and then all of the Oregon and Washington expertise from their Fish and Wildlife departments, and to develop a plan and be realizing that when we're in those conversations, the body of research, it's enormous body of research, and that you don't think about the Marine Highway as being North Shore, South Shore. I would also say, just for a pinpoint, how critical it is, since we've really been focusing on salmon recovery in the 4 lower Snake River dams. The Bureau has spent roughly, Army Corps and Bureau have spent roughly 23 billion to recover that species. And I would highlight this chart showing when we started making those investments in about 96, after you started seeing fish returns really start to show some improvement. And what is involved in that is fish screens was the first investment to prevent the smolts from going through the turbine bay. Then we put weirs on every single dam. And then we put juvenile bypass facilities. The one at Lower Granite Dam was $100 million investment. And we continue to improve the infrastructure. Every single one of those infrastructures built to save the species are pieces of equipment that quagga mussels would make their home and absolutely obliterate. They would plug the pumps and the pipes, they would plug the screens, they would plug all of the joints and hydraulics of moving those weirs up and down. And all of the gains that we make to try and really build a robust, sustainable and harvestable fish population, upriver from Lower Granite Dam into the high reaches of wild Idaho would be lost should we let this get away from us. And that's what it's at stake, a whole lifetime of investments. And I'm just so grateful for the dedication of our state and federal agencies, our partners, both North Shore and South Shore of the Columbia River. Thanks.
Right. Well, thank you for that, Representative Dye. But I think it's also worth pointing out that Washington and Oregon are not the only jurisdictions in the economic region taking this seriously and working together. Next up, we have Minister Grant Hunter with Alberta here to talk about the Invasive Species Task Force. Go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you. First of all, I wanted to agree with you that I think it's absolutely important to have a champion to be able to get anything done. And I think that as you take a look here today, I think that there were supposed to be about 150 people here. The problem is that because this is preventative measures, it's tough to put money into it. I sat on Treasury Board, which is, I'm not sure what the same thing in the United States is, but every year there was always, we tried to put money into things of preventive, but by the time we had gotten through all the things that you needed to put money to fight wildfires, couldn't get the money into preventive. So this is the problem we face as legislators. But I was asked to talk about what we did in Alberta. So I just wanted to kind of get a set stage for you really quickly. First of all, Alberta has 70% of Canada's irrigation land in southern Alberta. So for decades, our forefathers and foremothers had that vision that you know, we got a very dry area, you couldn't grow anything there unless you put water to it. It's got the heat units. And in Canada, you don't have a lot of those places. So where you've got heat units, you can put water, you can grow some great specialty crops. We grow 65 specialty crops in there, multi-billion dollars, tens of billions of dollars put into this. And I was made aware of the fact that these clouded zebra mussels got in. There was a study done by one of our irrigation districts. We have 11 irrigation districts. Over irrigation districts said it would cost them annually about $260 million. Now this is because all of the work that we do, we put the lines underneath the ground so we don't lose water. And so all of that would have to be redone. And so it would completely decimate a very important part of our economy. And so the premier tasked me with putting together this Aquatic Invasive Species Task Force. And really what we were to do was we were supposed to do a gaps analysis because we already were doing work to be able to try to keep them out, but we wanted to find out what we don't know. So what is the gap analysis? And so we actually were able to come up with a couple of things that I think were very important. First of all, we recognize that you got to be serious about this, and people have to take it seriously. I don't think people were trying to move stuff, but it's in Eastern Canada or Eastern Canada, Eastern United States, and they're just so used to it, they just don't recognize that they're carrying fossil fouled boats. I'll give you an example. We had a company out of Ontario that was coming over. They traveled through 3 provinces, Manitoba, Ontario, and then got into Alberta. They were at one of our largest off-stream irrigation reservoirs, ready to get into the water to do some work. Completely mussel fouled, quagga mussel fouled. And we were so close to having a complete disaster. Luckily, someone from environment protected areas saw these things and said, you can't get in, and we stopped them coming in. What's so sad about it is they went through 3 provinces without being stopped and inspected. And so we recognize that as a gap. So we have to start working together. We know that they come up from the south as well. So we have gone from 4 stations to 11 stations in the province of Alberta, and we're putting quite a bit more money into it. The other thing that we did is we took a look at some of the best practices that we found out in the States. In Utah, they were working with what's called a dip tank. And so we've looked at doing dip tanks as our long-term strategy to be able to approach keeping them out. And also just being able to create that culture within our boating industry where people say, you know what, if I'm gonna get into a lake, I gotta go into the dip tanks, I gotta do the time, I gotta make sure that the time is there to be able to do that. What's interesting though is we had someone on our task force, side note. He thought this was such a great idea that he went down with, he wasn't actually on our task force, he was just kind of on it, I guess. Anyways, he went down to Utah and he, without us knowing, he got the rights to this thing and then he wanted to sell it to us for $1 million for one of these dip tanks. And so we got to kind of work through that. But what that shows is that there are people take a look at this existential threat as a money opportunity. This is also something that we realize is a gap problem we have. You're trying to be able to do some really good, and then you've got some people who are trying to profiteer. And that's been a bit of an issue for us as well. Mandatory water inspections, we said it has to happen. Up until that time, you know, you go through and there wouldn't be any problems. We raised the fines to the largest, the highest in North America, $4,200 if you go by a station and not get inspected. $600 if you don't hold building club. So we're getting very serious about it because we recognize that if they do get in, the billions of dollars of cost is unacceptable. We did take it under the chin on that one. They thought that was a bit too much Big Brother but we are very serious about this. And then the other problem we have is that we only have one product that we can actually use if we ever got them in to our water bodies, and that's potash. And now in Idaho, I believe it was a chelated copper product that they use. We don't have any of those options right now, and we need to have multiple options because it depends upon the body, water body, about what you would use. And so I'm hoping that some of my other colleagues in the other provinces will be willing to advocate to Ottawa because they're the ones who actually are responsible for that. And then we have an eDNA program that is championed by I would say probably one of the foremost in the world, Dr. Patrick Hannington out of the University of Alberta. And it doesn't tell you whether it's dead or alive, but it actually does. It's a very, very fantastic program to be able to find out if you have any of the DNA from a zebra aquatic mussel. I don't know if it's for golden yet, but I'm pretty sure we can actually figure that out. So we can find out fairly quickly because we do test all of our water bodies in Alberta right now. And again, we're making sure that that is funded. I think that this is a great innovation. And then the last thing that we said we were going to do is we're going to make sure that we've got some tabletop and field exercises. If you saw this in Idaho, when they saw this, I talked to the guy, went down there actually, and he said, you know what we did? He said, we took the legislators and we brought them out on a boat, we put them on an island, we said, you're not getting off until you actually make a decision on this thing. And so they did make a decision right there. I thought it was a funny story, but
It might be a small exaggeration.
well, I thought it was a smart idea, but what it shows is that when you have something like this in the water, you have to move very quickly. You cannot let the political wranglings get in the way. I'll leave with this final thing. When you take a look at a Venn diagram, politicians on the Democrat side, the Republican side up in Canada, the conservative, liberal, NDP side, they're always trying to find that sweet spot right there in the middle where everybody agrees on it. I believe that this is one of those things, that this is a nonpartisan issue. The reality is we all love our waters. We want to make sure that we don't lose them to this invasive species. And so the Council of State Governors West, we passed a resolution 2 years ago, or I think it was 2 years ago. And it was 100% supported by both the Democrat and the Republicans on that board. So I don't believe that this should be a problem to do something similar here.
Great. Well, thank you. And yeah, that's inspiring. I feel like great reason to do this event is just to understand what's working and then try to replicate it elsewhere. So much appreciated, Minister. Next up, we want to spotlight what's happening in Saskatchewan, talking about an upcoming summit. We have Minister Travis Keesick. Go ahead, Minister.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I should have had a notepad, should have been taking notes. I mean, Idaho is next level, dropping you off in an island, like that's pretty impressive and everything else. And, you know, Grant, I gotta talk to you after, and we gotta get the dates and the time that boat showed up. There's gonna be some people fired, how they got across the Saskatchewan without being inspected. Serious issue. So, yeah, we have Aquatic Invasive Species Summit coming up in Saskatchewan. It'll be coming up in October. It's important that we keep this front and center on the public mind, and it's, I mean, it's been proven over and over again. I mean, every dollar that you can spend in prevention saves you $14 in cleanup costs. We have one reservoir in Saskatchewan, 60% of our municipal drinking water comes from one body of water. I mean, that would be astronomically horrible if we had zebra mussel. We're zebra mussel free, and we're very, very proud of that. And we work diligently on that. We have 11 boat inspection stations at borders, east, west, and south, working diligently. Great story. This spring, I was doing a clean, drain, and dry media announcement at one of our boat inspection stations. And a good person from Alberta was thumbing on his phone through Kijiji and found a heck of a deal on a boat in Manitoba. So he ripped over from Sylvan Lake and picked up this boat. And I was doing this media announcement. They had the lights going and everything else, and all boats mandatory to stop and be inspected and everything else. So this gentleman pulled into the highway turnout area, and so I went up and introduced myself to him and said, you know, thanks for stopping. It's a lot of $1,000 fine if you choose not to stop and everything. And he asked me who I was, and I said, well, I'm the Minister of Environment of Saskatchewan. Kind of looked me up and looked me down, and he's like, oh, you take these zebra mussels serious in Saskatchewan. Yeah, it was good media announcement. This summit's going to be very good. It's absolutely critical that we do all of our due diligence as legislators to keep it out. And, you know, one of the things, I mean, we've learned lots about, I mean, we have thousands of acres of irrigation as well, and we're doing a large irrigation expansion in Saskatchewan. So that would be horribly detrimental to us if they had that. But one of the interesting things I learned at this year's PENWAR was the implications on your power generating stations. We have numerous coal-fired power stations. We have natural gas-fired power stations, huge water inlets for cooling and steam generation and everything else. And how much would that cost to your municipal infrastructure and electricity? It's all a cost. It all has to be borne by the ratepayer. So I don't know. I always use that math in my head. Every dollar in prevention saves me $14 in the future. So we're doing our due diligence in Saskatchewan. Everyone's invited to come up in October to Saskatchewan to the summit. It's going to be very engaging and informative, and I really want to thank Steve and all the PENWAR team for assisting us and putting this on. And it's absolutely critical that as legislators, it's our role to communicate the value of prevention and handling some of the challenges we see mussels throughout our jurisdictions.
Well, thank you, Minister. And that's actually the perfect segue. You know, over this 20 years, we've been working together. You know, the constant champion in my mind, and really that thread has been the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, and has been instrumental in getting federal funding in the United States, has been supporting different summits, taking all of us together and figuring out what works and trying to build off that. And so I'm excited to introduce and bring up Steve Myers to talk about something that Pinware is considering and was brought up at the executive board meeting just yesterday or earlier this week. And take it from here, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Yeah, appreciate that. Just so everybody has them at their table, but there's just a draft copy of a resolution that we've been sharing around internally with the working group. Nothing has been finalized, and we're not looking to do that here today. But we wanted to give everybody an opportunity to provide input to it and also talk through kind of the higher level components of what we'd like to see in this. And so throughout that document, you'll see references to just the greater collaboration between our jurisdictions in the region, and then also looking at some of the other emerging threats related to golden mussels as well. I think Minister Hunter, he mentioned it earlier just about the resolution that the CSG West group did. The idea would be to build on those successes there and also work with our partners here to build more interest in this and more awareness. Just 2 years ago, actually, we were with Representative Dye on a letter to all of our Washington State delegation, reiterating the issues with funding, making sure our federal partners in Washington, D.C. were funding inspection station match dollars and those types of things. So every work that we do at Pinware to ensure that our federal partners know what's going on, but also our other jurisdictions know is meant to build on this and build that trust with all our members too, so that there's ability to share best practices, learn what's going on in each other's jurisdictions like we did today, and talk through these types of things. So with that, I was going to open it up to our panelists here just to get their thoughts on a resolution and some of the things that we'd like to see in it. And then I wanted to check and see, I know that Senator Cuff had mentioned that the Representative Millett from Montana, is also present. And if there was any comments that you would like to make regarding that work you did in Montana as well on the legislation that came through.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Let me try and see if I can get you on screen though. Hold on one second. I might have to stop sharing here. Okay, Tom. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I also thank Senator Cuff. He is my senator up here. By the way, my name is Tom Millett. I'm a representative up here in Northwest Montana. And aquatic invasive species is very important to us up here because right here in my district, we have one of the largest hydroelectric dams and generation stations in the state of Montana. That would be the Libby Dam, operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it puts about 600 megawatts of power onto the grid. Just real quick, I don't want to take up too much of your time, your valuable time. I did sponsor a bill. So the AIS program in the state of Montana is about 15 years old. And it was brought to my attention by a constituent that they had never changed any of the fines for, like, if you want to dodge a check station, one of our boat check stations, which, by the way, we have over 30 boat check stations just in the state of Montana. But if you wanted to bypass one of those stations, the fines were still the same old fines from 15 years ago. And we all know what happened since 15 years, a lot of inflation's happened. Plus a lot of awareness has happened now with AIS and how important it is for all of the Pacific Northwest to get a handle on AIS, and so that we don't want this stuff into our state because it damages our tourism, it damages our heavy industry, it damages the recreation opportunities that we have here, also power generation. So what I did is I just went through the bill and I increased the fines for and I do have to say, I'm very impressed with Alberta, and Alberta gives us a high bar, which I'm happy to try to meet next session. But $4,200 for dodging a check station, that's pretty steep. But that's the kind of stuff that we need. Here in Montana, you know, we don't have the palatability for that with certain legislators. So we only managed to get the fines increased. Like if you dodge a check station, the old fine was $500. Now it's $700 for a first offense, and a second offense it went up. It basically doubled from $750 for a second offense up to $1,400. Another thing that we did, that's for negligently violating. Now, if you get caught in the state of Montana purposely and knowingly bringing invasive species into the state, then you're going to, not quite like Alberta, but we do have a fine. We went from $975 fine up to a $1,950 fine, so $1,950. And it also comes with, you know, you get your, and it all depends on the judge. If the judge has the ability to revoke your fishing license and also to revoke your boat decal, so you can't legally put your boat in the water in the state of Montana. Now there is another one that if you introduce, you purposely and knowingly introduce aquatic invasive species into the waterways and lakes and streams of Montana, that is a felony, and it's 2 years in prison. And we increased the fine from $10,000 to $25,000. And we also, well, there also comes with that, the law states that if the judge deems it necessary, you will have to pay restitution for cleanup of anything that you brought in. That's about it. That's all I want to say for that. Like I say, Alberta's doing it really good. I really like that. I don't know if that's going to fly here in Montana, but it is something to shoot for. I also noticed that there is Mr. Tom Wolf, who is our AIS Bureau Chief for the state of Montana, works for the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. He is on this call. If he wants to elaborate on anything, I encourage you to ask him. He's pretty knowledgeable on all these issues. And with that, I will turn it back over to you guys. Thanks for letting me speak.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Representative Millett. We appreciate that. And you know, the state of Montana has shown a lot of leadership over the years, and certainly appreciate that information and that Montana's keeping the pedal down. Thank you. Steve, anything more about the resolution?
No, really what we wanted to do is just have more of an open dialogue right now with all our legislators that are here, and then also our folks that are sitting in the room too, just to discuss this more and look at you know, other options besides resolutions, of course, the actions we might be able to take to help improve the situation and move forward. So yeah, right now we were just going to open it up to questions, and also get any response back from folks that are in the room. And then also anybody online, if you'd like to raise your hand, we'd be happy to open it up for questions from those folks too. So with that, I don't know if there was any other responses we wanted to get from our panelists here right now before we open it up to questions, but if there was anything else that you heard from Representative Millett from Montana or anything else. So.
Well, Steve, as we're waiting for questions from the audience, I think I'm going to speak for everyone here today, and I'm just going to look to my colleague from Idaho to elaborate on being trapped on an island that Senator Mike Cuff was talking about. I think we're all really dying to hear about that experience.
Thanks. There was no trapping of anyone on an island, because I'm pretty sure that qualifies as kidnapping. I think what may have been referenced was the area on the Snake River that they did the initial positive test was in a remote spot of the Snake River. And access was very limited, and in fact, the only way for them to get boats and equipment back into where they originally found the villagers was to airlift the equipment back in there. And so, yes, and in order for folks to get back in there, it did require a certain amount of creativity. But I would also say that what we saw is because we did take the prevention part seriously. Once there was the detection, our Department of Agriculture was prepared to go. It happened quickly, it happened effectively, and it did so, I think, in a manner that spoke well not only to those on the legislative side that had provided the funding, but also to those within the agency that had the responsibility to carry it out. And as a result, I feel confident that we are on the path to having successfully treated that section of the river. Now, it's going to be 5 years before we're going to be able to say we have quote unquote cleaned that particular section of the river and will have to continue ongoing testing, but Idaho has acknowledged that there is a necessity to not only maintain the program that we had, but to build it out. And so funding came forward to increase the number of testing stations in addition to expanding the amount of hours that those stations are open during the season in the hopes of continuing to provide a level of prevention. Now, the one caution that I'm going to add is that for the first time since my exposure to this particular issue on the policy side was that during the last legislative session, there were some members of the body that I served in that expressed, let's just say, hesitation over this issue. And it was framed in some respects as a, why are we spending money here? So there's that piece of it where it's difficult to do the prevention piece. But there were also questions that were challenging the science of what we know about mussels and questioning whether or not villagers had actually been out. Questioning whether or not there was value in the state engaging in this behavior and questioning whether or not this wasn't being used for other purposes. And so trust in the institutions that we've been relying upon to help us deal with this issue. As I said, this was the first time that I had heard vocal enough pushback that it raised some flags for me. I would say that in your states and in your provinces, as you're having conversations with folks, don't just take it for granted that when you present them with the information as you've seen here today in a very clear, very persuasive manner about what these challenges represent and the potential costs that it represents to our communities, that it will get traction and will get support. There is the reality that there will be some who do not view this as the problem that those of us who are here and familiar with it see it as. And so from that standpoint, I look at us as not only being continued advocates of what we're doing, but we're probably also going to have to invest more effort in educating people why they are serious. Because even if we can maybe get them to the threshold of accepting that they exist and that they're in the system and that there is the possibility of doing these things, we may have to take an additional step of getting them to be committed to doing something about it. And this golden mussel situation, I'm afraid, separate from the potential costs associated with it and the challenges that come with it, is that there will be those who will look at it and go, oh, well, you just come up with one more thing. You just come up with one more thing that you now want us to go and spend money on and put towards a preventative program. And, as soon as we do that and, we make progress and you tell us that, it's being managed, you're going to come back and it's going to be another thing. And those conversations are going to be ones that we're going to have to figure out how to navigate. Because I can hear it. I can hear it in my head, the pushback of, well, you told us this was the only problem, and now you're coming back and saying that this is now a problem too. And it's going to be, well, when is it ever going to end? And there's a reason why the word invasive is in the title. And so from that standpoint, Senator Cuff is right. This is never going to be a job that we're going to be able to put the check mark by and say we're done, because that's not the way the biology works that we're dealing with. So from that standpoint, whatever that's worth.
I don't think that. Yeah, I guess now we can fill it up. Any questions from the audience? Comments or any other thoughts on today? Hold on one second. And if you could state your name and organization. I'm going to remain anonymous. Yeah. I'm Travis Nelson with Washington State PED Association. So in a former life, I was a biologist for the agency that Justin works for. So I can tell you, as being in the regulatory arena, that what you just spoke to is absolutely right. We have a very untrusting public, and in some cases, our electeds have constituents that share those feelings with their representatives, and then that ends up coming full circle. I think the way that this could be sold is that it doesn't. This is an adaptive management thing. We, as people, are an invasive species, and so we bring things with us. And when we travel all these different places, we bring things with us. We look around at Twin Lane, Blackbird, and the Scottsboro, all that stuff that you see on the highways. This is something that I think, in some ways,
I don't ever wanna see it become like Scottsboro and Hempstead and Blackberry. But, in the industry that I represent now with hydropower and water systems, I think it's really important to your point to get the word out that this is real. Now, we're just coming out of COVID, and there was a lot of suspicion around COVID. And this couldn't come at the worst time, try to say, hey, here's the next thing. But in reality, this is something that has been around for a long time, and that we need to take seriously. As a fish biologist myself, bass and bluegill and all those kinds of things that are not native to this region. They were brought here as we traveled, and they came from Missouri 100 years ago. This was about catching. Well, people like boating, some of those folks are coming from where they can get a good deal on a tugboat, the Great Lakes, and it comes all the way across from Montana. Gets to the edge of Idaho, and thanks to Idaho, you guys are like, hey, wait, don't let it get to our friend of mine. So thank you for stopping on that. Actually, Montana, I think it was the last one. So, but, at any rate, I think it is super important just to underscore and stop rambling here. Education is super important. I'm trying to build that trust up, because I think that the trust issue is a huge barrier. As a biologist, I get this because it is what next, what next. I used to forecast for fish, and that's one of the only things besides being a meteorologist that you can still be 100% wrong to keep your job. That's a little different today, right? I mean, so this is kind of a serious issue, and I think you're spot on. Education is super important. I had the opportunity to speak with the Spokane event that we had on Aquatic Invasive, and it's still, it's concerning to me that there's not 100 people in this room. And it's good that Denver continues to beat the drum, but it is really important. This is continues to be shared out and educated around. This is going to affect every single one of us.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we did, we moved pretty quick once we recognized the threat. We had set it up a long time ago, and then, you get into deficit territory, you start to cut back on budgets and stuff like that. So we were concerned about how quickly we move on this. We put the task force together, last year, January. We had the task, we had the white paper basically to the minister, to the premier, within about 6 months, so it didn't dally. And we had some of the best experts all across Alberta talking about this. But when we were thinking about implementing it, we were concerned because, you gotta go through all sorts of consultations with different groups, and it was gonna take forever. And so what we did is we looked for allies that would help us to move this forward quicker. And the big allies we found, especially in the south, where the irrigation districts, they recognized they were specifically going to be affected in their pocketbook. This was going to be an existential threat to their economic viability. And so we got them on board. And so if there was ever anybody who was, you're taking away my ability to go into these waters or whatever, make sure, first of all, we were quick to stop that kind of talk. And then more importantly, we had validators back us up and say, look, this is what's going to cost us if we go in there. And so we didn't have, like I have to say, I said, in terms of the Venn diagram, this was the best, sweet spot that I've ever seen. I've been doing this for 10 years now. I've never seen a more well accepted, at least in Alberta, and I guess that in other jurisdictions it'll be a little different, but in Alberta, we have had no pushback at all.
This is the next phase, I think, in my mind's eye, as to what needs to be moved forward. When we talk about existential threats and fear of losing something extremely valuable, it's something that I think rings true to people broadly, that the ecosystem of our waterways in our states across this region are now existentially threatened by this invasive species. And so, on a lot of these points, people feel like that's interesting, but I have no role in that. I don't have personal agency. And I don't feel a particular sense of responsibility. I'm not a boater, I'm not a fisher person, I don't recreate out in the water, I don't, whatever it might be, broadly speaking, the general public. But I think that this is where we need to give people a role and give them an opportunity to contribute to the cause. And so when I look across the network of organizations within our river communities, our boating community, places that have water bodies that could be threatened, raising the alarm, raising the sense of responsibility, and then having a meaningful way that you actually personally can do good. And I think that's why we have activism, is people want to do good. They want to feel like they can be a force for good, viable in these environmental issues, that they can have an impact. This is one where communities can have a direct impact by engaging your Chamber of Commerce, engaging your Boy Scouts, having them come and participate on a clean, dry, an empty, cause, have them help with, boat washing days and contribute to that and really activate and find organizations, environmental organizations that have continually been engaged in issues like saving spotted owls and things like that. This is kind of our spotted owl, to save our waterways and to prevent the incredible ecological devastation that this invasive species will cause if we don't all come together as a community, as a whole, in our region, across both nations, and really activate that idea of, we actually have the capacity personally to make a difference, to take up the moral cause of saving our waterways.
So I appreciate that. And one thing I was gonna add, and then perhaps part of it too, was just the collaboration that was going on with detection for the Washington State. So the work that Idaho and Montana actively does to warn others about potential threat these happening too. So I know that a few of our folks from Idaho, Montana line, we sort of thank them for making sure Washington State and Oregon are safe from progress from mussels transiting from the Great Lakes. So with that, any other questions? Oh, Tony. Two part questions. One is, other than invasive mussels, there are other invasive species of interest. I know at least in irrigation districts, Eurasian milfoil, other vegetative invasives. An issue, but in addition to that, I would like to hear some comments. I understand that aside from habitat loss, invasive species are the biggest threat to native species and our endangered species.
And that's a really great comment. For invasive species, a lot of times you're looking for that kind of that poster child, if you will, and kind of putting like a face to your enemy so that you can get people on board, get legislative support. One of the things that as regulatory agencies we do is that we try to create regulatory policies and implement programs in such a way that it will prevent something like quagga and zebra mussels from entering our jurisdiction. However, the law is written in such a way that, at least in Washington and many other jurisdictions, that anything on your boat or in your boat or in that water on your trailer is prohibited. And so while, a lot of our work and a lot of our effort is trying to prevent invasive mussels, a lot of our decontaminations of vessels in the state of Washington are because they have aquatic weeds like Eurasian water milfoil on the trailer. And that's something that we're trying to share a little more broadly with irrigators. And I know that homeowner associations, for example, often spend a lot of time and money managing aquatic weeds in their own lakes. you know, ultimately the work that we're doing is not only preventing invasive mussels, but it's also protecting the spread of some of those threats. While that may not be, you know, the main purpose, we're still doing really good work. And I feel like other jurisdictions are in a very similar place. I believe, Representative Dye, did you have something to add or anyone else? Great.
I know we're about 5 minutes, so we probably do last comments and then wrap things up. And then yeah, thank all our panelists and everybody for attending today. So with that, I guess I'll just give it back to Justin. If any other closing comments or
Sure. Well, you know, I really appreciate the conversation and the interest and continued engagement in this issue. It's been really great to see, you know, that all these jurisdictions in their own way are trying to do more. And I think that we all recognize this existential threat to our waterways, but it seems like, you know, there's also this thought that there needs to be more. And so it's really great to see that in this panel and to hear that. And I'm feeling pretty inspired about what's next. And I think that's a really great segue into what Steve will be sharing soon with the resolution asking for feedback. You know, how do we take this and try to elevate it so that we have a regional approach to continue doing more? And with that, closing comments from our panelists.
I would just say that this time around, we did put a little funding in for public outreach and have funding for a position that you will see the work that she has done in a very short amount of time out at the table. And I encourage you to look at that material. It's comprehensive, it's engaging, it has QR codes. And I think that it's the start of the potential of building some activism around protecting our waterways and protecting our infrastructure, but more importantly, you know, the thing that appeals to students, schools, community organizations, that they have agency to protect their environment.
So when I get asked about what the value of the MOU is, I often point to the work that's been done on this particular issue, because it's demonstrated proof of concept. It was proven that states and provinces can work together on an issue. When you're dealing with something, water doesn't recognize boundaries on a map. Water goes where it goes. And in this instance, Penmar has demonstrated that there is an avenue available for us to work together. And the draft of the resolution is reflective of the years of work that have gone into this issue. And so Justin is right. I feel some positive aspect to this, if nothing other than, you know, demonstrating the proof of concept that Penmar is capable of taking complicated issues, working across states and provinces to put forward solutions that do lead to demonstrably better outcomes than we would otherwise have if we were attempting to do it alone. And so from that standpoint, I think we continue to build on what we've done with aquatic invasive species, and we can take that model and continue to use it in other areas to the benefit of our states and provinces.
Definitely want to plug our aquatic invasive species workshop coming up in October. It's going to be invaluable for everyone to attend. You're all welcome. It's critical that we keep this front and center and work closely with all of our neighbors on these issues. It's we have aquatic zebra mussels free, but just across the border from us in Manitoba, Clear Lake, a national park, they have a 0 boat ban on their lake because of zebra mussels. So it's 15 miles away from our jurisdiction. So this is top of mind for us, absolutely critical. Thankfully, we drain all of our water in Saskatchewan into Manitoba, so it can't swim upstream. So that's a benefit. But you know, seriously, if Alberta gets it, it'll really challenge us because everything runs from Alberta into Saskatchewan. So we have to work together, work connectively, and keep it front of mind for all of our legislators and our Treasury Board that we're very aware of in Canada and the challenges that come from that. So definitely want to hopefully see a bunch of you in Saskatoon in October.
Everyone's east except for population, so you get everybody's comes from Saskatchewan.
We're putting a kibosh to that.
I realized on this issue that I was a recovery redneck. And that I had to get my head around this. Now, if you can convince me of the importance of doing something like this, and I'll tell you the reason why I say that, because I would have been the last guy that would have been the champion for this. That's just the reality. big, big believer in, you know, small government and that, all my life I've been this way. But I recognize that there is a place for government and government policy. And so, like I said, I'm a recovering redneck when it comes to this issue. So if you can convince me, you can convince other people. But I believe to be able to do that, you have to be extremely clear. This is why I like the idea of keep it simple, sweet. You want to be a champion for something, then say clean, drain, and dry all across the whole jurisdiction. So that the kids, when they're in school, that's what they remember. If dad wants to put a boat in, like clean it, drain, and dry that. That's how you actually make those changes. I remember when I was young, a long time ago, everybody smoked. Now, not as many people smoke, and the reason why is because it started from the young people to be able to do that training right from the beginning. And so that's, I believe, the same thing that we're gonna be able to beat this. In Alberta, I'll lead with this. In Alberta, I think we're 90 years rat-free. And I remember when we started this whole program, we actually had rat police. I wanted to be a rat police guy. And there was rat police and they specifically go out and they exterminate any rat population, make sure we do not have rats. And we've been done it for 90 years. And I think that if we work together, we can keep this from moving out, where it is. Utah has done a great job. Lake Tahoe, where it's been in, they have not had a spread of that for I think 10 years. And they've done that through, you know, some of the same stuff that we're implementing. And that dip tank is mandatory when you go into Lake Tahoe. And so they've got the culture, they created that culture. You're gonna go into that lake, you've got to be able to make sure before you leave, you have to be in a dip tank. And so if we create those cultures, I think we can beat this. I don't think it has to continue to spread. I'm bullish on this. I believe we can stop it from spreading. You take a look at the map and you don't feel very bullish because there's just so much that spreads so far. But I think we're all aware of it now and we think that works.
Great. Well, fine closing words, a great call to action. We can do this. We've been doing it for 20 years together and we've got more work to do. So looking forward to seeing you all again. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the event this October. Representative Millett, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone else that joined us online. With that, let's give our panelists a hand and thank you all so much for coming.